Now, the echoes of a high-stakes phone call between President Trump and Vladimir Putin had barely faded before the skies over Ukraine erupted in explosions. Russia has unleashed one of its largest and most brutal attacks since the war's outset, leaving at least about 23 people injured in Kyiv and causing widespread destruction. A short while ago, Trump held a phone call with Zelensky. They discussed air defenses and agreed to work on increasing capabilities to defend the Ukrainian skies. Our next born gets more.
Kyiv trembles under a merciless barrage. Flames scorch the horizon as Russia launches one of the fiercest onslaughts yet. Ukraine stands defenseless, its people trapped in the crossfire of Putin's rage. Watch the horrifying moment when a drone struck a residential apartment in the heart of Kyiv. 539 drones and 11 missiles raining down on Kyiv in a harrowing 8-hour barrage. Among the missiles fired were Iskander and Kinzhal. This is the most intense attack since the conflict began in February 2022. The opening salvo was brutal, explosive drones plummeting onto schools, apartment blocks, cafes and railway stations. Underground metro stations became shelters of last resort as detonations shook the city center. Residential buildings along both sides of the Dnipro border were left smoking, glass shattered, and fires blazing into the night sky.
I had a feeling that something was flying every minute. The Shaheds, attack drones, were descending, and then bang, bang. Then we realized that our building had been hit. We were sitting in the hallway. When we opened the door to our flat, we saw sparks flying as high as the 4th floor. We later learned that the drone had hit the 2nd floor below us. Everything is covered in soot now. It's difficult to breathe there. We have packed some belongings and are going to the countryside.
I woke up to the sound of explosions. First the Shahed drones started buzzing, and then the explosions began. Then people started screaming outside. The explosions from the Shahed drones kept coming.
President Zelensky calls it a deliberately massive and cynical strike, timed ominously just hours after a phone call between Putin and Trump.
I'm speaking to President Zelensky tomorrow, early in the morning, and I'm very disappointed with the conversation I had today with President Putin, because I don't think he's there. I don't think he's there, and I'm very disappointed. Well, it's not, I'm just saying, I don't think he's looking to stop, and that's too bad.
US President Donald Trump says he made no progress with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on ending the Ukraine war in a call, as the Kremlin insists the Russian president would stick to his aims in the conflict. Moscow claims military targets were hit using high-precision long-range weapons, hypersonic missiles and drones, asserting all designated objects have been hit. Despite Russia's escalating attacks and Ukraine's desperate need for air defense systems, the Trump administration has decided to halt shipments of Patriot missiles and other promised weapons to Kyiv, claiming it needs to secure its own stockpiles. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, now joining us from Washington, D.C. is Mr. Heino Klink, who's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia. Mr. Klink, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. In your assessment, what do you think is happening at the moment? The Russians, on the one hand, say that they do not see any kind of a diplomatic solution to achieve their strategic goals in Ukraine. On the other hand, after speaking with Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin seems to have turned on the heat in terms of the number of attacks that we've witnessed over the Ukrainian skies. What's happening?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think what we're seeing here is the intransigence of the Kremlin and a continuation of the brutal assaults against the Ukrainian civilian population. If you dig a little deeper, if you look at the last night's strike, which are consistent with the strikes that the Russians have focused on, it's against civilian population centers. Very, very little military significance at all. So it's meant to terrorize the public as opposed to achieve any military objectives. And if we think about the fact that when Russia first invaded Ukraine in 2014 and then expanded its invasion in 2022, the Russians have been unable to actually achieve those strategic objectives that Putin continues to refer to. So if he's saying that there is no diplomatic solution in sight, I would offer there's really no military solution in sight from the Russian perspective either, because they have failed to achieve their strategic objectives to date.
I think that's an interesting comment. But, also looking at what's in fact been happening in the course of the last week, the White House has announced that it is cutting down shipments, stopping shipments of certain key weapon systems, such as the Patriot interceptors to the Ukrainians. Ukrainians have said that this only encourages the Russians to intensify their attacks even more. Why do you think Donald Trump at this moment is drawing down on the weapon shipments? Is it because there's a change of policy at the American end, or is it simply because America at this moment is not able to produce these Patriot interceptors in the quantity that is needed?
So to take your last question first, there is in fact a challenge within the American defense industrial base to produce systems, exquisite systems like the Patriot interceptor. So that is in fact a challenge. That is not a new challenge, but it has been exacerbated by shipments to Europe in the last several years, as well as, of course, also just 2 weeks ago, or less than 2 weeks ago, when Iran struck or tried to strike Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. So yes, it is a capability that is in high demand.
Right.
And as we know, the United States has global responsibilities and has forces deployed all over the world that require that capability. The other thing that I would offer is it was not the White House that announced this current change, perhaps, in shipments of defense hardware to Ukraine. It was the Pentagon. So, so it remains to be seen if that is a final decision, if it's an interim decision. The one thing I would say is that it certainly takes into account, again, America's global responsibilities, the requirements that U.S. forces have all over the world. The truth of the matter is the U.S. military needs to have certain capabilities to be able to defend itself and its allies worldwide, not just supply that type of hardware to partners such as Ukraine.
All right, interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Harnickling, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.